Hi, and welcome to the Spiritual Awakener podcast. This is a podcast where I get to interview really cool people that I've met along the way or I've come across in my life that have really amazing stories to tell of how they spiritually awakened or they had a turning point in their life that's led them to help you, the collective. And if you've got a spiritual awakening story, or you've had a turning point in your life that's led you to realize that you had so much more you had to do than just what you were doing at that time, then contact me at susankennard.co.uk or my website, susankennard.co.uk. So I'm really looking forward to my next guest. We've been trying to navigate this for a while. Obviously, I'm in the UK. He's in the States. He's going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But I would like to introduce you to Dr. Morgan Oakes. Now, I met Morgan at the New Media Summit in San Diego. I think it was the first one. Was it the September one, Morgan, that I met you?
September, October, yeah.
Yeah, so it was the September, October one because I've been twice. I went in March this year, but we're actually recording this in December of 2020. So if you're listening to it later on, you know that we've actually known each other for just over a year. And he is Dr. Morgan Oakes, and he calls himself a transformational therapist, really. And he's like a modern twist on transformational therapy. And I'll let him talk to you and tell you all about himself and what he does and how he can help you. But just to say that when I was at the New Media Summit, I stepped into it. I didn't know anyone really. And I sat next to Morgan and I instantly connected with him. We instantly connected, didn't we, Morgan? We kind of, had a kind of like kindred spirit thing going on. And I think you find that with certain people in your life, most definitely. And we're going to be talking quite a lot about who we are as a spiritual being having a human experience. And I definitely know that the people that I connect with along my path are people that I'm meant to connect with. And I'm sure as you're listening to this, you'll definitely know that there are certain people that you meet along the way that you're meant to stay in contact with, and Morgan's one of those. So welcome to the Spiritual Awakener, Morgan, and tell us about you. Where are you for a start?
Yeah, Susan, well, really great to be on the show. And yeah, we definitely connect. And I would say at that event, there were so many great people, right? Just a wonderful event. I was on fire that whole weekend, just great conversation and connection. And I still remember the table we were at where we sat next to each other and you know what, we would change tables probably every 3 or 4 hours throughout the event. And I think for you and I, kind of a really easy overlap is that blend of like science and spirituality.
Exactly.
Right? And so for people, just for people so they know, I'm living up near Seattle right now. I've been here for about 9 years, and my background was I was a mechanical engineer. Then I became a chiropractor. Then I added in physical therapy. I was always like, all right, what's the next research article? What's the next super left brain white paper that's going to help guide my healing practice? And then, I would say that, the blessing was I had all these kind of horrible things happen to me that created the rub for that spiritual awakening.
And it is interesting, a lovely blessing. You say a lovely blessing, like some people might be listening to that going, well, if horrible things happen to you, why would they be a blessing? But that's how it works, right?
Yeah. And I have a friend of mine that talks about, like, if there's no rub, there's no growth, right? If things are just, and I think we see this play out in, in the media a lot, where if people don't have anything to kind of move them forward in life, then they tend to find trouble, right? Or it just, at a certain point, I feel like the universe is trying to kick us onto that path of evolution, and we can go willingly, or we can,
struggle,
or there's other ways to get there. So
I think purpose is the key, isn't it? Like, mission obviously is the key, but instead of it being mission impossible, it's kind of mission possible. But we sometimes feel that it isn't, is it? It's like, oh my God, that's a real curveball, or, and definitely childhood stuff. We both work with that. And it's those sort of things, isn't it, that we feel define us when they actually don't define us.
Yeah. And mission's tricky because you know, I had a mission to be a tremendous chiropractor, to really help people with, you know, with their bodies and improving their lives. And although it was a good mission, it wasn't my highest mission.
It was part of your mission, right? It was a step.
Part of my, it was a gateway. It was a gateway mission.
Gateway mission. I like that.
Yeah. And so, you know, I had at a certain point after school, you know, I got out of a 4-year relationship, you know, and I joke around that it was kind of like a bad country Western song, like lost my girl, lost my dog, lost my house. Wow. And, you know, so all these things are happening. And there was an automobile accident. Wow. And then I was at a point in my chiropractic business where I didn't know if I was going to make it over the financial hump of, you know, being successful as a business. So just all these things kept hitting me. And then what opened up for me, what blossomed, as you got all those beautiful flowers behind you, what blossomed was synchronicity, right? People started, I would hear something once, I would hear it twice, I would hear it that third time. I started meeting really, really weird people. Beautiful people, and very different from my previous experience, right? I started hearing words, you know, spiritual words, philosophical words that I had never heard before. And that really...
How did you hear them? What, inside, like a clairaudience thing, or from people, or?
In the beginning, just from people, you know, and I mean, imagine, you know, being in this town for long enough that you think you know everything about it. And then all of a sudden you're like, what's this spiritual bookstore? And, you know, what's this person talking about intuition or synchronicity or, so it was things like that. And I just, you know, I think it's that idea of like, when you realize that you're passionate about something, really just keep pulling at that piece of yarn that's coming out of the sweater to see what happens. And I would, you know, I would go to the bookstore for sometimes 8 hours, you know, and I would just sit there with a tea, and I would read and read and read.
I bet they loved you, Morgan. I just wanted you to go and buy them, right?
Well, this place was set up to let you do that a little bit. And I always joke, I would probably read 6 books during that day, but then I would buy another 6 just because I felt so guilty about the other. So I was still making sure I supported them so they would stick around, but just ravenous for the information. And that just started opening thing after thing after thing. And then to take it a step further, you know, inside my chiropractic practice, at a certain point, I eventually just started intuitively doing energy work and some shamanic work. And I didn't know how I knew it, but I knew it.
You knew it,
right? And so that was
kind
of the next level. I remembered it, So, you know, and then that was 15 years ago, and it's just.
So did you do ayahuasca? Did you ever do ayahuasca?
You know, I ended up doing plant medicines later on. Yeah. Well, and actually, that being said, so there was a lot of those things happening. And actually well, and it's interesting. This is a story I've never shared in this format before. And
maybe it was
timing.
Because I found ayahuasca a few years ago, and ayahuasca was my, so if people don't know, it's like a plant medicine, and it's mother ayahuasca. And so I also did San Pedro as well. And essentially, I'm not advocating it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying this is our experiences. So it opened up my channel so much that I began doing light language. So I resisted it for a while, but it was almost like, well, I would have probably done light language and healing, but it would have been later. And what I think ayahuasca did for me was opened up. I already spoke to my guides, but it opened up my potential on my mission. And I've written my book now and everything. So it was all of that, really. So it was, I think it just sort of speeds you. I always laugh. It's like 35 years of therapy in one like sitting or 2 sittings, right? But you tell me, let's hear your experience.
Yeah. So like I said, I've never shared this piece. And I think for me, I've never wanted to discredit a lot of the hard spiritual work that's meditation and these other things for these other pathways. But the reality is I was having all those bad things happening. I had moved into a new place, And a friend asked me if I wanted to do mushrooms at that time.
Ah,
And I was
okay,
like,
yeah.
yeah, like, why not? And this was a person that was very experienced. So instead of giving a normal dose that you might just hang out with your friends and do that,
and laugh a lot.
what he put in front of me, I go, you realize that would feed like 10 to 12 rugby players. And he's like, yeah, I know, that's your portion. And I took that, and that for me was kind of the final crack in the dam, and that really opened things up.
Yeah.
And then, and then what I think is true about those plant medicines, and again, I'm not pro or against for anybody. What I'm for with people is listen to your intuition and know what's right for you. And no matter what you're doing, be safe, because the spiritual awakening process, even if you do it at Barnes and Noble, it can tip your life over onto its side a little bit.
And look at what's happening in the world. I know we're interviewing right now, at the time of this great awakening that's happening in the planet. Some people might not call it that, but I call it that. And so there's a huge amount of awakening happening. And however you awaken might be from just listening to this podcast and saying, oh my God, actually, there is a lot more to us than this. Or it might be from listening to someone speak, in a bookstore, or you might read a book, or you might choose to use plant medicine or whatever it might be in Peru or wherever you choose to go. So keep going. Well, I'm excited to hear your story.
And to even add to that, like in my chiropractic practice, I'll have people that come in that after an auto accident, like this is a time where things have been shaken up, and as they're kind of coming back together again, what was the message? Right? Or you keep having these bad things happen in relationship or in career, like what's the message that you're not getting? And so
definitely. For the physical body, totally, if the physical body shows something, then we know, don't we, what message is being held there. Really interesting.
So that ended up being a part of the beginning. And then, like I said, I really dove deep into bookstores, and I would spend, I know there were days I was on YouTube and just Googling things for like 12 hours. And I was just uncovering and just going like, I'm into that. That's interesting. I'm curious about that. And so, when I talk to other people about this, I think it's really about when you notice something a little bit different, stay curious about it and see where it takes you. Cause it was just things that I hadn't heard before that I was somehow attracted to. And I just let myself keep diving into that place of curiosity. And what I would say about my spiritual path, I was a kid in class that I got good grades, but I also, I was kind of the class clown, I liked playing around. And if I wasn't in a class that pushed me, I would misbehave. Right. I needed to kind of be on that growth edge, or else I had too much spare time on my hands.
But we hear this all the time, don't we, with kids? They get put into, I homeschool mine now, actually, since September. But you hear about them being in schools where they've tried to push into a peg, like a round peg in a square hole, or the other way around. And it's just because they're bored. They're bored like you were, and they're just bored. It's just not enough for them. They know so much more than we are teaching them, in the sense of education, right? They already know it. So they're like, that's not worth bothering with that.
Well, and I think before my awakening, that's how life was for me. The class of life, I was just kind of coasting. It was kind of boring. Not that I wasn't working hard at work and everything, but the spiritual awakening has truly made my life fascinating and beautiful, and something I'm excited to dig into and be an active participant in. For the last 15 years, it's made life wonderful. And even at the event that we were at when we met, not a spiritual event, but an event with spiritual undertones, right?
Oh my goodness. And they said it was the first one that had been like that as well. They said, yeah. Like it was just, completely full of really conscious people.
And for me, that event, just paying attention to my intuition, noticing who I would notice across the room, and and just all the conversations that opened up, like going into an event and just being intuitive and following synchronicity and just being open to what might unfold.
Yeah.
It makes an event like that even more fun for me. I feel like I'm always tracking this like behind the scenes game. Or you'll hear
Yeah.
like totally normal sentences everywhere.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden one sentence is highlighted, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what was in that sentence, but I'm going to hold it because there was a gift there for me.
And it's like an undercurrent, isn't it? So when you're listening to someone, I know we're both therapists, so we kind of hear people all the time, but it's listening to the undercurrent of what someone's saying as well, isn't it? Rather than just what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, and then, and so for mine, like I do chiropractic and I do, I'm a high performance coach and I do energy work and shamanic work. There's that interesting piece where you and I, when we're working with somebody, we know it maybe right away, or at least within a session or two, like kind of thing, the rock in the trail that they keep stubbing their toe on. And then it's interesting because we can't pull it out. If we pull it out for them, there'll be another one, right? So how do you help somebody find their peace?
That's a really good point, because I think a lot of people want to be fixed, and I don't really attract that anymore. But I know that obviously physically, if you're working with someone, then quite often they'll be coming because physically there's something going on as a message, which we know that it's a message, but they'll see it as there's something wrong with me. And and so we're not the healer, are we? Morgan, we're not the healer. We're just the facilitator for that person to heal themselves. And I think that's really important, what you just said. It's like, if there isn't that one, then the message gets louder, right?
Yeah, well, and I'll share in probably like 2 or 3 different ways how it's not true for healing and we think that it is. So there's that idea of active or passive healing, right? You come to a chiropractor, you're passively laying there and they're helping you get better. But when you go home, you need to actively step into your rehab and your therapy to get stronger. If you come to a coach, my job is to ask questions so you answer it, because when you answer it, you believe it. If I tell you, you might get a little bit out of it, but you don't believe it. And for me, it's gone a step further as well. I moved to Seattle after meeting a shamanic teacher in Mexico, like 90-second introduction, handshake, hi, nice to meet you. It was this very cordial, like it could have happened at the New Media Summit that we met at. It was like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. 90 seconds, you walk away and go to lunch. Well, I knew based on that interaction, I should move to Seattle and train with this teacher.
Wow.
And one of the things that she says is that the time of the shaman is over, right? The time of the shaman is over. And the way that I take that is, we've really relied on this intermediary between us and the divine for millennia, right?
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful for people to hear that. So that, the time of the shaman or shaman, depending on where you come from, is over. I love that. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. And for the early part of my like spiritual practice, I'm a shamanic practitioner as well. I would do the work for people. I would do the cord cutting. I would do the extraction. I would do the pieces. And more in the last few years, my allies were like, have them do it. Teach them the steps. It's really that idea of, giving somebody a fish or teaching them to fish. And more my guides are having me do less and less of the work. And I'm doing more teaching in my healing sessions.
Exactly. Same.
Same. Which is beautiful, right?
It is, because the empowerment comes from, you can see the person shift and heal themselves and they feel empowered. Well, just that energy of empowerment to know that we can remember that we can heal ourselves. That's it, isn't it? You are a divine being of light having a human experience this time. And you just had to remember you could do it. You could heal it. You just had to remember it. People don't always agree with that. They don't agree with it. And perhaps they feel that there's something outside of them which will make them better. And I'm going to be careful with my words, but something outside of them, that they might take or they might experience, is the answer. And of course, that's missing the point of who we are, isn't it? It's missing the point of our incredible, ability to shift and change and create and heal ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a couple angles on that. Like, one thing I do believe, sometimes people need to to work with a healer that's going to do some of the work for them to get them above this, to get them above the threshold of confidence, empowerment. Like it's almost like if somebody's sitting on a swing set and they're just kicking their legs and nothing's happening, it's like, oh, they haven't found the rhythm of the swing set. And so if you can get behind them and start giving them, gosh, I feel like the truth tingles on the back of my neck right now. So if you can start kind of moving that swing set with them.
Yeah, I love that.
Then they get the hang of it. And once you've got a swing moving, then you can get to that point where, you know, you can be 10, momentum. 15 feet in the air. Yeah, you can create momentum. So I think, you know, in my practice, what I'm finding is a lot of my work is to get people in momentum and give them the tools, teach them how to work that swing set. So then they're in charge of their own game, right? So
you must do that. That's our job. I mean, you can do that physically. I know over here in the UK, chiropractors weren't working for a while, but they are now. So do you do that physically, just so people can understand how you work? So you have a physical practice, but you also have, you work like this, right? So we're working on Zoom at the moment, so you can coach, you can work with people in a coaching way like this. Yeah. At this point, like most of my work is via Zoom. You know, I'm doing house blessings and soul retrievals and the coaching. And so I still have a physical practice, you know, at the point that people listen to this, it'll be probably about a half a day per week, right? The majority of what I'm wanting to do. And what I really started coming to was I want to help people with their souls, not their spines. Right. And spine work has been amazing. It's, you know, it's been a great gateway for me to do the work as well, because I've got that time where people are physically on the table and face down. So I can be back there, like snapping my fingers and doing the extra work. It's been a great, tool for learning and giving me a lot of, it was a tool. That's what I was hearing, was a tool. It was like your tool to step into that complete energy healing aspect. Wow. So very soon we won't be seeing you physically.
Very soon there'll be a lot less. There'll be a lot less.
There'll be others doing it. It's almost like you're stepping into a new, well, not new, but you're stepping into a different vibration, and others will be doing the physical work still, which is great, because we need people to do that as well as the emotional work, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of people, that's that permission piece as well. A lot of times we've maybe evolved past a relationship or a behavior for ourselves or a career or a location on the planet. And again, that's where the messaging can get a lot more difficult. That's when those accidents can show up. If we're not actively listening to like the intuitions and following the pathway that's laid out for us, I think
we got to wake up.
A nudge from the universe, right? So
do you feel, just stepping you back a bit, so if you were to think about when you were growing up, would you say that you always had this kind of, I don't know, like a sixth sense, people talk about it, don't they, or an intuition? Would you say that you were always the sensitive one, or,
No. And I think I really like sharing that with people as well, because you and I both know people that they've been seeing spirits since they were 3 years old, right?
Yeah,
I
wasn't.
Never happened. And for me, I was totally asleep. I had no idea. I grew up in a small town in Wyoming, so I was into, bicycles and sports and girls. And I was just
climbing trees. I was.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me, I was 30 years old before my awakening.
So that was around your Saturn return then, because I was about 27, 28. So that's interesting. So we were about the same age, and it's called a Saturn return.
I found out about that years later.
Did you? Yeah. So it's really quite a prominent time in people's lives, and they either, go down that road then, or it just gets really tough. Well,
and one of the things I think, so let's address the elephant in the room, right? Like the whole world is experiencing COVID, right? And anytime I
Yeah.
talk about this, I really want to preface it with it's an incredibly difficult time on the planet. A lot of people are,
Yeah.
struggling in so many ways and losing loved ones.
Absolutely.
And, so that's the first place I think to enter that conversation. The
Mm.
second place is the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of my spiritual awakening, there's other pieces that I missed. In hindsight, I saw them, but I missed them when I was actively,
Mm.
in the game of life.
Yeah.
And I think the blessing of COVID is we all needed to slow down. We all needed to,
Mm-hmm.
take a second look at our careers and our lifestyles and our
Yeah.
relationships and our, how we were showing up, in connection with friends and loved ones. And then
Mm.
hopefully we can make a
It's
more
a shift.
evolved, better decision. So I think this pause
Mm.
has been, I'm just seeing a really positive outcome for a lot of people that are, this is certainly a lemon. And some people are really using it to
Mm.
make lemonade as opposed to,
Yeah.
just making that scrunchy face when you bite a lemon.
And
So,
it's a really good link to talk about, really, because we can see there is on some level a perception of divide, because there will be some people that believe something, some people that believe something else, and of course, the physical thing of a mask or not a mask or whatever.
yeah.
But there is that divide. But I think a lot of people are realizing who is a vibrational match to them. So I've heard many of my clients talk about different friendships that they didn't even know that person was like that. Like, wow, actually, I can't, that doesn't resonate with me anymore. So that friendship's no longer a friendship. And then there's other things, relationships obviously have come, really highlighted with romantic relationships, where people have either got closer because they never spent any time together. So now they really are back into the throes of, wow, that's what I really loved about you. Or, oh my God, like I can't spend the next 20, 30 years with this person. I've realized that, this isn't vibrationally right for me, or on a soul level. And then I've seen, I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen so many people say, oh my goodness, like my mission, and I work with people, my mission is to help people get on their mission, right? So I see people say, I always knew that there was something that I was meant to do. And now I know it, because I've had to stop, like you say, I've had to pause. I've had to really come in to we had to be inside, right? But we had to go inside.
Yeah.
So instead of being outside, we had to go inside. And there are some still not quite there with that. And that's okay, because we share the world with everyone. But that going within, I think, was really important. As you said, it's like a massive awakening. And I do feel that the Schumann resonance of the planet has definitely raised. I think, we are really seeing a different vibration. And the ones that are doing the work on themselves, and I mean work, I don't mean hard work, I mean really acknowledging vibrational set points and what are we attracting. These are the ones I'm watching. Wow, they're like just really being supported by the universe. And if you're listening to this and you feel like life is really tough at the moment, it might be time to have a look at what emotional attachment you have to that, because it will just be what you're attracting, won't it, Morgan? Without judgment. Like we say that without judgment, but just to be a witness of that, what's showing up, is that always showing up in my life? You said at the start, patterns and things like that. Well, it's only us, isn't it? Us that can shift that and change that. And to find a facilitator like Morgan, like myself, like whoever you feel drawn to work with, to facilitate that shift for you. So if people are listening to that, then that might be a really good time to say to you, Morgan, how do people get hold of you? How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, so the way people can get a hold of me, if you go to drmorganoaks.com, that's the way to find me. Right now, there's a nice opt-in. It's the 6 keys of living your best life, which will really, it spreads things out. I think we can look at past, present, and future. And I think there's things we can let go of that are kind of slowing our spin. There's things we can step into that'll raise our spin. And there's another thing I've just released, which is the Intuitive Success morning routine.
Oh,
and
good.
that's
Tell us about that.
yeah,
Can you share one thing about that? Can you share like a little, are you going to share a little, one of your little kind of processes? That'd be cool.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. And I would preface this, like, I'm always wanting to give tools. A few years ago, I was really blessed. I was able to give a TEDx talk.
I was just going to ask you about that. So that's my next guidance, right? So talk about your TEDx.
Gotcha. Because this will weave into the free thing. And so at this TEDx talk, they had a topic. I prepared this whole thing for my TEDx talk. And then we started just having a conversation about life. And I brought up this intuitively guided trip I had taken to Central America. Right. 4 specific visions. 3 of them happened. It's truly the most transformational thing that's happened to me this lifetime. And that ended up being my TED talk. And when I was giving my TED talk, huge snowstorm, I was going to give the talk and then get into a 4-wheel drive vehicle and drive like 2.5 hours home that night. And I was like, you never know when it's your time. And my goal for that talk was, if that's the last thing I left on the planet, that it would continue to empower people. So I would say there's 7 takeaways about developing your intuition that are built into that TED talk. I wanted it to be a beautiful story and like some solid takeaways. And one of those takeaways is it's really around your morning routine. It's that time where, I start off by sharing that, dream space is a great time to connect to the divine. Right. And a lot of amazing things that everybody's aware of, they came from that space. Like Einstein's theory of relativity came from dream space. The chemical structure for benzene and kind of the birth of organic chemistry came from dream space. The sewing machine, dream space.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah. Now that story's, the visual that came through to create that lesson's a little graphic, but that was the location of it. And so, I tell people, like, when you wake up first thing in the morning, like you're in that kind of that gateway between 2 worlds. And it's a good time to journal what you can, not pick up your cell phone, not, pick up the newspaper, not clip on, turn on the TV, and really spend some time
just that
doing a morning routine that serves you. And what I've found over the years, because I've had probably hundreds of morning routines at this point, because every teacher, every coach, every guru has their version of like, this is what's best and you should do what I'm doing. And what's true, a lot of times that's it. They're sharing what worked for them. And so I was like, well, what about the intuitive morning routine where you're almost given, it's almost like a buffet. All right, everybody pick a protein. Like pick your protein. There's 6 choices. Pick your carb heavy dish. There's 6 choices. Pick your dessert.
Not in my life.
Well, that's because you're really good at making up your own rules, as am I. I've always joked, the box that I belong in is that I don't like being put in a box.
Same. Yeah. I'm a cheesetarian, actually. I'm a cheesetarian. So I choose what I want to eat when I want to eat it.
I'm in. I've just
You're
found my path.
That, right?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the intuitive morning routine is giving options for all these things that work and saying, hey, you may want to pick something from the physical category, maybe something from the spiritual category, maybe something from the mental category. And here's some food things to consider, some ways of looking at this. Right. And
so how would you do that with someone? So say, I'm just thinking for people listening, so you wake up in the morning, you're in your bed still, you're still in your bed. Would you say you're still in your bed? Yeah. So, because I have a particular thing that I do, but not every morning, to be honest, but I do different things. But I wake up in the morning in my bed, and then I just have that moment before, I've got 2 children. So that moment before anyone else, the puppy or anyone else is awake, and it's just me. And so I always just send light from my heart up to the universe, out to the collective and back to me, and listen to my guides. But it's not the same every day. But are you talking, so people are lying in their bed and they've just woken up and they might have been in a dream, or they might not have remembered their dream. And so they would be what is an idea for them, just so they can visualize it, because I think it might be helpful.
Yeah. Let's take a half step back, just because the permission piece is really big for people, I think.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I say something, it becomes dogma, right? And so let's take a half, because what I would do is I've got my journal waiting there, and I would roll out of bed and I would journal if I have it, right? But that's again putting something else on somebody else.
That's what you would do. See, I wouldn't do that. So that's different. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because for me, there's times where that dream is right there, and if I don't get it down, it starts running through my fingers like sand, and then it's gone. But
oh my God, that's always the way with dreams, isn't it? Dreams do that, don't they? Right? Yeah. But a lot of my courses have been written from dreams. My courses that I create have the seed of them has been written from dreams. And a dream this morning was potassium. So I was like, when I woke up, I was like, I need more potassium in my system. And I checked, I was like, I need more potassium. So this is what happens. Like you're saying, listen to your dreams and write them down. That's what you do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's one thing. And for everybody, I think we know what helps us feel good. Even if you're not, even if you don't think you're on a spiritual path, what makes you feel good? Right. And for a lot of us, we're like, when I have my cup of coffee, or when I read my favorite book or sacred text, or when I journal, or when I just sit and watch the sun come up before, like you said, you got a couple kids, before the tornadoes start within the living room. So I think it's good to just remember what's worked well for you in the past. And then also, what are the things that maybe you can let off the list? And like for me, if I pull out the cell phone and I let some of that stuff happen, my brain starts spinning, right? Or if I start really trying to solve a work problem at 6:30 in the morning, then I've lost the rest of my day. I haven't held that space for myself. So
that's a really good point.
Lean into what's working, let go of maybe something that isn't serving you, and know that a lot of the things that work for like high performers, business people and people like that, it also works for spiritual people. So we know that if in that first hour of the day you get into the news or you get into social media, your productivity for the day goes down by double digits.
I would imagine.
And so whether you're wanting to be productive around work or around love or health or connection with your children, your ability to do that effectively has gone down. So if we can lean into research.
Great note, isn't it? Great note for people. Yeah.
And for me, I think the blend of ancient wisdom and modern transformation, that creates a win-win, right? What's required to be what's required to be an Olympic athlete is also required to be a spiritual Olympian.
I love that. And it's so true. And I try to talk to my children many times about, it's focus. It's like, what makes your heart sing, and what are you focusing? What are you putting your focus energy into? And I think that's really important, isn't it? So we're putting our focus, as you said, into Facebook or whatever it might be, social media. Our energetic focus is there, and we actually don't know what is going to flash up on our phone or iPhone or whatever it is, especially YouTube as well. So we don't know what our vibrational field is going to get when we switch on our phone. So I think that's a really, really good point. It's a habit, isn't it? People do.
Well, and even that division piece that you touched on earlier, I think we always look at division as a bad thing. And I would say for myself, when I had my spiritual awakening, there was a division that happened because what was awesome for me the months before that was less awesome moving forward. And so a lot of my friendships transitioned, evolved, because I had shifted. And so I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. What I would say is, people get it's easy to get defensive if we talk about people. So let's not talk about people. If we talk about food, we talk about food, when I was shifting and spiritually evolving in my food, all of a sudden, if I go to McDonald's, I'm sick the rest of the day.
My children My children are similar. Yeah, they don't, they
Yeah.
like, occasionally they have it and they're like, Mom, I think I've gone off this, you know, they just don't have that resonance with it. Yeah. Anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't a judgment thing. It wasn't that certain foods were bad, but what I started doing was, if I take all my labels off of everything, when I eat it, does it make me feel good or bad? And then based on that, you know, week after week, month after month, year after year, your diet will change because your vibration is changing. And you don't get upset when years later you don't eat a favorite food from 1992.
Yeah.
But we will tend to, we have different attachments to our relationships. And so I think it's worth noticing, like, in those relationships, when those divides happen, is it because it's supposed to happen? And what I'm finding now is I have really great friends that voted for both US candidates. I have really great friends that have both opinions on masks. And what I've just kind of let myself do is not feel like I need to change anybody's mind, stay curious. I'm still strong enough to have my own opinions. I have good boundaries around how conversations and experiences happen. But I feel like it's allowing me to love more people, because I haven't put myself on one side of the fence with judgment or a desire to change the other side of the fence.
And that's key. But when we come to families, if we look at families, so perhaps our parents, you know, the generations, I know definitely here in the UK, an older generation has a different view of, you know, always watching the news, the newspapers, all of this. It's a very different view to perhaps a younger generation. And so some of our parents, definitely mine, some of our parents are in a different vibrational set point and mode. And it's definitely, I chose a really good family, you know, because I had to really, you know, make my own choices and shift my own vibration with no judgment, you know, like literally what you're saying. So if you're listening to this and perhaps, you know, you have a thought that we're so much more than who we are as this physical being, and that we have this ability to heal ourselves, but your husband, your mother, your, you know, grandparents, whoever it might be, your father, doesn't have that same belief, it might be that you don't actually need to convince them, but you just represent that, bless you, you just represent that aspect of yourself, that light out in the world of who you choose to be and not who they choose to be, because they're playing a beautiful role on the stage as you're playing a beautiful role on the stage, right?
Yeah. And, you know, and even, you know, this answer could go both ways as well, right? Like, I truly believe that 80% of everything is always working, right? So I can always show up into a relationship and, you know, and maybe I don't bring up politics or COVID or, you know, some of the big things. And I think I've always been like that, though. Like when I would go meet with my grandmothers specifically, they wanted to gossip about the neighborhood and about these things. And I would always talk about weather, which I don't care about weather.
We do here. So I would, literally, the UK always talks about the weather.
And I think, I mean, Seattle's very, very rainy as well. So Seattle people try to do that. But the thing is, in the summer, they complain because it's too hot. And in the winter, they complain because it's too dark. And they always have something to complain about. What a blessing. Right? They're always getting,
what a blessing.
They're always getting the dish from the buffet that they seem to keep ordering. But, you know, so I will meet my family, and with these grandmothers, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, tell me again about how you met granddad, or, you know, what,
so nice.
You know, like I would always bring it back into something that actually had heart and meaning, that was something that was going to be a good use of our time. And, you know, and I think we can do that with, you know, I have uncles that are incredibly staunch in their beliefs that are different than me. And every time I get on the phone with them, I talk to them about their hobbies and what they're doing and their relationships. You know, like I talk about the things that are common ground, because I'm not going to change them and they're not going to change me, but I still want to maintain that relationship. And I also want to acknowledge, I also know people that their families are just too abusive around some of those topics. And at a certain point, it may make sense that we don't spend time in certain ways with those family members.
And I think that's really important to say that, if you do feel, if you are in a situation like that and listening to this, as Morgan was saying, if it's abusive, then that's a time to really walk away from that conversation. It's not, or situation, it's not something that you need to prove anything or even speak your truth to. You just can walk away if it's abusive, because that's loving yourself. It's really loving who you are to be able to say no or speak your truth. So Morgan, my goodness, it's like nearly coming up to almost an hour. And my podcast, I know my podcast, 45 minutes, 50 minutes. It's my podcasts are normally half an hour, but I just wanted to keep going with you, really. So tell me, I'm still keeping going with you for a bit longer, by the way, but I just wanted to let you know that, what the time was. But it's all linear anyway. It's all made up time anyway. We'll just be here for another hour.
We're just in the game. We're in the game.
We're just in the vibrational kind of joy of ebb and flow. So just tell me, so basically you can work with people. So if somebody wants to work with you, can you just give me a little bit of the sort of things that people come with to work with you, so that people can understand, and if they want to work with you?
Yeah, sometimes it's as little as something feels wrong, right? Or I used to be happy, but I'm not. Or I keep bumping into the same behavior or situation. Many people will come in with, they're at a stuck point in career, in relationship. Sometimes they can be like, oh, well, this thing happened in the past. And it continues to
still playing, right?
to kind of control, where life is going and moving forward. And to be honest, Susan, gosh, a couple years ago, do you remember the movie Bohemian Rhapsody about Queen?
Yeah, but I didn't see it, but I know about it.
Okay. So at one point, it's a really beautiful, well done movie. And I'm watching the movie. It's like 2 Christmases ago. And I'm in the theater, I'm sobbing. And he is out in front of this stadium full of, concert goers. And I was like, I really want to be helping people like that. I really want to be helping more people. And my guides and allies were like, you can. Maybe it's 1 person at a time. Maybe it's 10. Maybe it's 100 at a time. So just keep doing your work. And I set a goal that year, 2 years ago, to just help as many people as I could. And what I started doing is just a free half-hour introductory call.
Oh, fantastic.
And I have people get onto those calls. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, read this book, watch this YouTube video. And if you need anything else, let me know. Or, oh my gosh, here's this great type of a practitioner that's in your area. Go see them in person.
Because we do that. We always link people because, what might not be right for you will be for me, and for me for you. So, And empowerment sometimes is, gosh, there's certain books that I've referred out probably hundreds of times, and then for some of those people, when they come in, I realize, like, just like you, I'm intuitive. And so I start getting hits like, oh, we need to do some cord cuttings from the past. They need a little bit of like high performance work to raise their energy and vibration in their day to day. And these will be some tools that if they keep doing them as part of maybe a daily practice moving forward, then, day by day, they're going to be in a better place. So I usually just start with that half-hour call. It's a good chance for me to connect and see, what is it that they need? Really. What is it that they need? Am I the person to help them? And if so, what might that look like? So amazing. So people can contact you. Just say it again, your website or your email, whatever, so they can contact you if they want to book that session.
So it's Dr. as in doctor, drmorganoakes.com. And, in the beginning, there's a free place to get that 45-minute training video. If you go into the coaching tab, there's a place to do that half-hour phone call with me. And again, my goal is always to empower people, whether that's with me or somebody else. And when I get off those calls, even if I refer them to a book and a YouTube video. Like, I've done what I'm here to do.
Exactly. And it's you spreading your light, isn't it? Your soul's light, out to the world. And I think the more that we all do that, in whichever way we do it, depending on what our purpose was, what we chose to do, the more we can do that, the more people can actually feel it. And I think that's what's happening with the planet. I think as we are healing, the planet is healing as well. So good way to end. Is there anything else you want to share with my audience? The Spiritual Awakener podcast is, for people to kind of maybe sow the seeds or, just expand on their spiritual awakening. But what would you like to add?
The last thing I would share for everyone is sometimes there's something in your life that you're wanting to accelerate towards, and that may be the sign of your awakening or your evolution. Sometimes there may be something that you want to stop experiencing or move away from. And that's also that same nudge to step into your awakening or your evolution. Like, it looks different for everybody. And if you just allow some quiet time in your day and your life, you'll be getting those nudges, and then the pathway that opens in front of you is going to be the most fulfilling one you could have possibly experienced.
Wow, beautiful. Well, thank you, Morgan, so much for being here on the Spiritual Awakener today. It's been so fun kind of talking to you and having this conversation. And I hope everyone, you're listening. I hope you've got a lot from this conversation. Reach out to Morgan, reach out to me, and just remember that you're never doing this on your own. That you're always supported, you're always loved. And even if sometimes it feels that you're not, just remember that you are always, always having a hand held. So thanks for joining us on The Spiritual Awakener. If you want to hear my awakening story, pop over to episode 1, where you can hear all about what happened to me one night. And I look forward to seeing you, experiencing you, feeling you on the next episode. Much love for now.